This was a man who once commanded nearly 90% of the entire American oil industry. And when the government eventually stepped in to dismantle the empire he built, something strange happened. His fortune actually grew larger. This is the story of John D. Rockefeller, a man who was despised by many in his own time, yet would go on to become the first confirmed billionaire in history. July 8, 1839. Richford, New York. A child entered the world in modest circumstances. His name was John Davidson Rockefeller. His mother, Eliza, was deeply religious, a devoted Baptist who believed firmly in honesty, discipline, faith, and relentless hard work. His father, William, believed in almost none of those things. William Avery Rockefeller, known throughout the area as Devil Bill, lived a very different kind of life. He drifted from town to town, posing as a traveling salesman, but that label concealed something far darker. "Papa, where do you go when you leave?" "Business, son. Important business." But that business was built on deception. Bill sold bottles of colored water, claiming they were miracle cures for cancer. He pretended to be a deaf-mute beggar in order to overhear private conversations between farmers, secrets he could later exploit to cheat them. Money alone was not enough for him. He enjoyed watching people lose everything. And he treated his own family with the same ruthless philosophy. "I try to outsmart my boys whenever I can," he once bragged. "That's how they learn to be sharp." One day he placed young John on top of a high chair. "Jump, son. I'll catch you." The boy leapt. His father stepped aside. John slammed into the floor. The lesson was simple. Never trust anyone completely, not even me. That brutal moment would become the foundation of Rockefeller's worldview. To him, the world was not a friendly place. It was a battlefield, and in a battlefield, you either become the predator or the prey. Then, in 1849, Devil Bill took that philosophy to its natural conclusion. After accusations of sexual assault and increasing scrutiny from authorities, he fled the United States and disappeared into Canada. There, he reinvented himself under a new name, Dr. William Leviston. He married another woman while still legally married to Eliza and lived an entirely separate life for the next 50 years. Back in America, he left his family with nothing. Penniless, abandoned, John Rockefeller never forgot. At just 16 years old, John Rockefeller became the man of the house. Quiet, intense, and unusually disciplined for his age, he turned his attention to the one thing in life that never lied to him: numbers. He enrolled in a short 3-month bookkeeping course, determined to master the language of business. Shortly afterward, he secured his first job as an assistant bookkeeper, earning about 50 cents a day. But Rockefeller approached the job with a level of precision that bordered on obsession. Every cent he earned, every cent he spent, he wrote it all down. He kept these records in a small red notebook he called Ledger A. Nothing escaped it. Through relentless saving and extreme frugality, he managed to accumulate $800 by the age of 20, an impressive sum for someone so young. Yet Rockefeller understood something important. Saving money was not the same as entering the world of real business. To do that, he needed more capital, so he did something that likely went against every instinct he had. He went to his father and asked for a loan. Devil Bill agreed to lend him the money. But true to his nature, he charged his own son 10% interest. Rockefeller took the deal without protest. With that money, he entered business with an older partner named Morris Clark. Together, they built a produce trading business around beans, pork, and oats. It was stable, predictable, and relatively safe. Then, 1859 changed everything. Oil had been discovered in Pennsylvania, and suddenly the region was overflowing with what people began calling black gold. Refineries began appearing everywhere, and Cleveland quickly became one of the main centers of the new industry. Clark saw danger. "John, this oil business is chaos. It's speculation. People will always need food. Let's stick to what works." But Rockefeller saw something else. People will always need to see in the dark. Oil is light. Ignoring Clark's hesitation, they partnered with a brilliant chemist named Samuel Andrews and built their first refinery. For a while, the partnership held. but tension slowly grew between the two men. Rockefeller wanted to borrow aggressively and expand, while Clark feared the risk of debt. By 1865, the disagreement had reached a breaking point. The partners decided to settle it with a private auction. Whoever bid the highest price would take the refinery. Clark thought the young bookkeeper would back down, but Rockefeller kept raising the bid until the refinery was his. After winning control of the refinery, Rockefeller renamed the business Rockefeller and Andrews Company and began applying the same disciplined thinking from Ledger A to the chaotic oil industry. At the time, refining oil was incredibly inefficient. Most refiners only cared about producing kerosene for lamps. Everything else, gasoline, naphtha, tar, was treated as useless waste and dumped into rivers. Rockefeller saw something different. He looked at that waste and saw profit being thrown away. If we can't burn it, he reasoned, we can sell it. Working with Samuel Andrews, the refinery began converting leftover byproducts into lubricating oils and paraffin wax, turning what others discarded into new revenue streams. But Rockefeller didn't stop there. He began eliminating every unnecessary middleman. He purchased forests to produce his own barrels. He built kilns to dry the wood himself. By controlling more steps of the process, he could sell oil cheaper than his competitors while still making strong profits. By the time he turned 30, the former bookkeeper owned the largest refinery in Cleveland. When Rockefeller looked at the oil industry, he didn't start with the wells. He looked at the railroads. At the time, railroad companies were trapped in brutal competition. They were constantly slashing prices to steal shipments from one another, creating a chaotic race to the bottom. Rockefeller recognized an opportunity. He walked into the offices of the railroad executives with a simple proposal. "Gentlemen, I can guarantee you 60 carloads of oil every single day, rain or shine." The number stunned them. 60? That's more than the rest of the valley combined. Exactly. In return for that massive shipping volume, Rockefeller demanded something powerful, a secret partnership. This arrangement became known as the South Improvement Company, or SIC. The system had three ruthless mechanisms. First, rebates. Rockefeller received huge discounts on every barrel of oil he shipped. Second, information. Railroads secretly provided him reports about competitors, where they shipped oil, who their buyers were, and what prices they charged. Third, the most devastating rule of all, the drawback. Every time a rival shipped oil, part of the shipping fee was secretly paid directly to Rockefeller. Once Rockefeller had secured his railroad advantages, he began moving quickly against his competitors. He would invite refinery owners to his office at 26 Broadway, speak calmly, and present them with a simple choice. "You've seen the shipping rates. I am being paid on every barrel you move. If you stay in this business, you will eventually go bankrupt." Then he would offer a solution. "Sell your refinery to Standard Oil. You can take cash or stock in the company." Many accepted. Those who refused soon discovered the reality of the situation. Shipping costs rose, supply chains disappeared, and credit became impossible to obtain. One by one, the refineries began to surrender. Between February and March of 1872, the process reached its most dramatic moment. In what later became known as the Cleveland Massacre, Rockefeller absorbed refinery after refinery at astonishing speed. Within a legendary 48-hour period, 6 refineries were purchased. Within 3 months, 22 of Cleveland's 26 refineries had either sold out or been forced to close. But eventually, the secret arrangements behind this expansion were exposed. And when the public learned the truth, the backlash was explosive. The collapse of the South Improvement Company did not stop Rockefeller. By that point, he already controlled Cleveland's refining industry, and his strategy simply evolved. Instead of relying on secret railroad agreements, Rockefeller began reshaping the entire structure of the oil business. He introduced something new: vertical integration. Rather than controlling just refineries, he started buying the industries that supported them. He purchased companies that produced white oak barrels used to store oil. He acquired warehouses and storage facilities. He even bought chemical plants that manufactured the acids needed for refining. Competitors suddenly faced a terrifying reality. Even if they managed to refine oil, they often couldn't find barrels to store it, chemicals to process it, or transportation to move it. But one final obstacle remained. Independent oil producers in Pennsylvania began constructing a massive 110-mile pipeline designed to carry oil directly to the coast, bypassing Rockefeller's rail networks entirely. For them, the pipeline represented survival. For Rockefeller, it represented a threat, and his response was ruthless. He began buying up land along the pipeline's route, blocking construction with lawsuits and legal delays. When that wasn't enough, his teams interfered with the project, bribing officials and sabotaging progress. By the time the pipeline was finally completed, its owners were already exhausted and financially broken. Rockefeller simply stepped in and bought it for a fraction of its value. By 1882, Rockefeller had already dominated the oil industry. But controlling such a massive empire created a new challenge. Standard Oil had grown into a complex network of companies scattered across many different states. At the time, American law prevented a corporation in one state from owning stock in a company based in another. Rockefeller needed a new structure, so his lawyers invented something unprecedented. They created the trust. On January 2, 1882, Rockefeller and 8 associates signed a secret agreement that pooled the shares of roughly 40 different companies under the authority of 9 trustees. The arrangement allowed Rockefeller to control the entire system as one unified machine. From his office at 26 Broadway in New York, he managed the empire with obsessive efficiency. His attention to detail became legendary. In one factory, he ordered workers to seal kerosene tins using exactly 39 drops of solder, arguing that 40 wasted material while 38 caused leaks. Meanwhile, Standard Oil expanded across the globe. Rockefeller flooded Asian markets with kerosene, even distributing millions of lamps for free. If people had the lamps, they would always need his oil. By the early 1900s, a powerful new threat began forming. At McClure's magazine, journalist Ida Tarbell started investigating Standard Oil. Her motivation was deeply personal. Years earlier, her father had been an independent oil producer in Pennsylvania, one of the many men whose livelihood had been destroyed as Rockefeller's empire expanded. For 2 years, Tarbell worked like a detective. She interviewed former Standard Oil employees, uncovered forgotten contracts hidden in railroad archives, and carefully reconstructed the secret network of rebates, drawbacks, and railroad alliances that had fueled Rockefeller's rise. Her investigation became The History of the Standard Oil Company, a series that shocked the American public. The story quickly reached Washington. President Theodore Roosevelt launched a massive antitrust case against the company. Finally, on May 15, 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered its verdict. Standard Oil was declared an illegal monopoly and ordered to break apart into 34 separate companies. But Rockefeller still owned stock in every one of them. As those companies grew, their value soared. By 1916, John D. Rockefeller officially became the world's first confirmed billionaire. Rockefeller had built the most powerful business empire the world had ever seen, and even when the government destroyed it, his fortune only grew larger. The bookkeeper who once counted every penny had become the first billionaire in human history.